Good evening. This evening we have reached the story of God's big test for Abraham. Back in the beginning, when God created man, he created him in his own image. Male and female, he created them, and he made them one flesh. God said that it was not good for man to be alone, so he made the woman as a companion for him, and Adam was very happy about this. All was perfect and good. Beautiful trees, beauty to look at, no problems of any kind. Yet in that garden, God had placed two special trees. One was the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and one was the tree of life. Adam and Eve could enjoy anything in the garden, but they were not to eat from the one tree. God was testing the love and trust of Adam and Eve. Now, Satan had already fallen by that time, and he heard God's commands telling him not to eat of the tree. And he saw this his opportunity. He wanted to ruin the relationship between man and God. And so he pounced. He set the trap, deceiving Eve. She ate, and Adam did too. We know that Eve was deceived, but Adam was not. So why did he eat the fruit? The scripture does not answer this question explicitly. Some have speculated that Adam chose to do this because of his love for Eve, that he chose Eve over God. This may sound romantic, but actually, it was a failure on his part. God could have come with other ways, a way of saving her if he had taken his responsibility and done the right thing. He did love her. God loved her at least as much as Adam did. And from other verses, we learn that the responsibility for the sin and the subsequent curse was laid squarely on Adam's shoulders. He failed the test. Over 1,500 years passed until the time of Noah. All mankind had become corrupt. God saw this, and he was grieved. He saw the violence, and every thought and inclination of the heart of mankind was evil all the time. So God decided to wipe the earth clean, as it were, to wash it off, start anew. But he had not forgotten his plans. He had not forgotten his plans to save mankind. He found one man that had faith in him, the man Noah. Noah had faith in God. And so, when God said that what he planned to do, to wipe out all the people on the earth and the animals, and that he was to build an ark, he obeyed. Faith results in obedience. True faith results in obedience. If Noah had said, "Yes, right, Lord, you're right. Yes, they're evil all the time, and you should wipe them out," but he had not lifted a finger and not built the ark, do you think they would have been saved? No. And through his obedience, not only Noah and his wife, but also his 3 sons and their wives were saved. They were there on the ark for a year. All the people on the face of the earth outside who had not entered the ark, and the animals, died. But the animals and Noah and his wife and their children, 8 people in all, they were all saved. And then God made a plan, a covenant with Noah. He said, "Never again will I destroy the earth through a flood." And he gave him a sign of his promise, the rainbow. Now, Noah and his wife, they had 3 sons, Ham, Shem, and Japheth. And as people naturally do, from that point, they increased on the earth. They had sons and daughters. And so the population on the earth increased again from that time. Now, when God made his promise to the people, he didn't say, now that people have learned their lesson, then I'm making this promise to you to never do this again. No, he said, even though every inclination of their heart is evil all the time, I am not going to do this again. It didn't depend on people having changed. People had not changed, and he knew this. So the people on the earth, they increased on the earth. And God had said, when he blessed them, he said, increase and fill the earth. But people had other plans. They weren't planning to fill the earth. They were planning to stick together as one. And they all had one language and there was like one nation. And they made this plan. And they became proud, building a city and a tower in it. God didn't approve, and he foiled their plans and scattered them. After that, the people again lost their ways, turning to the worship of many gods. So God again chose one man through him and his descendants, revealing himself again to people. At the time that God chose him, Abraham was 75 years old, and his wife, Sarah, was 65. And he promised that his descendants would increase on the earth so that they could not be numbered. But at that time, Abraham and Sarah didn't have any children. And they waited. And they waited. They went. They went as God had said, go to a place I will show you. They waited, and God did bless them. And their flocks and their herds, their camels and donkeys, and all the forms of riches at that time did increase. So he became a very rich man. But they still had no children. And now Sarah was around 77 years old. So Sarah gave up waiting and came up with another plan. She said, here, take my servant Hagar and have a son through her, and then I will adopt the son, and then we will increase our descendants through him. And it was a partial success. Hagar did get pregnant. He did agree to it. They had lost patience. He did agree to this, and she got pregnant, and they had a son through, and they named the child Ishmael. Now, when Abraham and Sarah had left Ur of the Chaldees, they had brought with them Abraham's nephew Lot. God did bless Abraham and Sarah and their animals, and their wealth increased. Lot also had flocks and herds, and his wealth also increased. Now, the problem was that it was a very dry and parched land with not much water, so there was not enough food or water for their animals as long as they were together. So Abraham said, let's separate. And he let his nephew, Lot, choose for himself where he would go. So Lot looked around, and he saw that this area in the valley, near what is called now the Dead Sea or the Salt Sea, he saw that it was it had a lot of grass and water, and it was good for flocks and herds. So that's what he chose for himself. Went down to the area around Sodom and Gomorrah in that valley. The trouble was that the people in Sodom and Gomorrah were very wicked. They were doing terrible things, violent and wicked. Then, when Abraham was 99 years old and Sarah was 89 years old, God appeared to Abraham and said that he would increase his descendants and that his wife Sarah would have a son. And through that son and that son's descendants, his promise would be fulfilled. Through his descendants, all the families of the earth would be blessed. He said through his descendant, or through his seed, referring to a specific one. And when Abraham heard that his wife Sarah would have a son, he laughed. And he asked God to bless his son Ishmael. God said, "Yes, I will bless him, but it will be through your son with Sarah that I will fulfill my promise to you." Then came that day when three men, or three, what looked like men at least, came to visit Abraham. At that time, God repeated his promise that his wife Sarah would have a son. Sarah, by this time, was 89 years old, as you remember. And she heard this and she laughed. Perhaps it was silently, but God knew. And he said, "Why did Sarah laugh?" Then she got afraid and she tried to hide it. Well, you know how that goes. It never works very well to hide anything from God. When Adam and Eve had hidden from God, God found them. When Cain tried to hide what he had done, God came to him. He told him, "I see that blood seeping into the ground." It never works to hide anything from God. So God said, "Yes, you did laugh. But 1 year from now, you will have a son. And you are to name him Isaac. Isac, which means he laughs or laughter. It would be a reminder of the times that they had laughed. When the three visitors left, the two who were angels went down toward Sodom. The other that had told them the promise concerning Sarah was God, appearing as a human. Now, when the two went down toward Sodom to check on the people of Sodom and Lot, Abram's nephew, then God revealed his plan for Sodom. And Abram interceded, bargaining with God. "God, you are the righteous judge. Because you are a righteous judge, you wouldn't ever include the righteous with the wicked in your judgment. So what if there were 50 righteous there? Would you destroy the city?" And then 45 and 40 and 30 and 20 and finally down to 10. And I'm sure Abraham was thinking, well, certainly there must be at least 10 righteous people in the city. All the while, he's thinking about his nephew Lot, afraid for him. Well, we know what happened there. God didn't find 10. He found one, Lot. When God destroyed those cities, the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah and the surrounding areas, the villages around them, he did, remembering his promise to Abraham, God did save Lot. And he saved, because of his concern for Abraham and Abraham's nephew Lot, he saved also his family, taking them by force out of the city, telling them to flee and not look back. But remember what happened. Even Lot's wife was not saved in the end because she didn't trust the words of God through his angels. And she did look back. And so she was turned into a pillar of salt. And his daughters, as we learn later through the stories of what happened later, we find that they were not righteous either. But God does. He always saves those who have put their trust in him. Lot was saved. Now, God had said that within 1 year, Sarah would become pregnant and give birth to a son. So 1 year from that date, Sarah did have a son, and they named their son Isaac, which means he laughs or laughter. Sarah was amazed and said, "Who would have believed that Sarah would nurse a son? Yet I have borne Abraham a son in his old age." Well, speaking of old, by that time, Sarah was 90 years old. "All who hear about this will laugh with me," she said. At the time of Isaac's birth, Abraham was 100 years old and not Sarah 90. For 25 years they had waited for this son. During all this time, Abram and Sarah's faith had grown. They had seen God do the impossible and knew from experience that he never forgets his promises, but always follows through. They had lost patience and come up with their own plans, resulting in Ishmael. Ishmael grew up and ended up having 12 sons, and those sons became leaders of tribes that were constantly warring with one another and with other people. These were the fathers of the Arabs, who to this day are a constant source of trouble for the descendants of Isaac and for others as well. Our sin does result in lasting problems, not only for ourselves, but also for those who come after us, those who are around us. Time passed, and Isaac grew up. When he was a little boy yet, he was about 4 years old perhaps, the time that he was weaned, as it was customary in those times. When he was weaned, they held a feast. And when they were holding this feast, a celebration for the occasion, then Ishmael was laughing at Isaac. And this caused a problem. So they end up being thrown out or shown out. And Hagar and Ishmael ended up living out in the desert south of there. But all this time, Isaac is growing up. By the time he was probably at least a teenager, possibly even 20 years old. One night, God tested Abraham. We read in Genesis 22. Sometime later, God tested Abraham. He said to him, "Abraham." "Here I am," he replied. Then God said, "Take your son, your only son, Isaac, whom you love, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains I will tell you about." This place is the area in which Jerusalem is now. Early the next morning, Abraham got up and saddled his donkey. He took with him 2 of his servants and his son Isaac. When he had cut enough wood for the burnt offering, he set out for the place God had told him about. On the 3rd day, Abraham looked up and saw the place in the distance. He said to his servants, "Stay here with the donkey, while I and the boy go over there. We will worship, and then we will come back to you." Abraham took the wood for the burnt offering and placed it on his son Isaac, and he himself carried the fire and the knife. As the 2 of them went on together, Isaac spoke up and said to his father, Abraham, "Father." "Yes, my son," Abraham replied. "The fire and the wood are here," Isaac said, "but where is the lamb for the burnt offering?" Abraham answered, God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son." And the two of them went on together. When they reached the place God had told them about, Abraham built an altar there and arranged the wood on it. He bound his son Isaac and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. Then he reached out his hand and took the knife to slay his son. But the angel of the Lord called out to him from heaven, "Abraham, Abraham." "Here I am," he replied. "Do not lay a hand on the boy," he said. "Do not do anything to him. Now I know that you fear God because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son." Abraham looked up, and there in a thicket he saw a ram caught by its horns. He went over and took the ram and sacrificed it as a burnt offering instead of his son. So Abraham called the place "The Lord will provide," and to this day it is said, "On the mountain of the Lord it will be provided." Wow, that's quite the test, huh? I'm certain that I would have failed that test. And we do not read that Abraham told Sarah before setting off. I can imagine that if I had heard God tell me to sacrifice one of my daughters, I would have thought myself crazy. No way. I must be hearing things. What did I eat for supper? What's going on? Am I going crazy? Then why did Abraham do this? He loved his son dearly. In another verse, it states what was on his mind. He reasoned that God was able to raise Isaac from the dead. So because of his faith, God counted him as righteous. It wasn't that Abraham and Sarah were without sin, or that they had never failed. We know that at least twice Abraham had resorted to a lie concerning Sarah, calling her his sister instead of wife, because he didn't trust God to protect him. He had forgotten that God was with him. We know that their plan failed with Hagar and Ishmael, and those times when they laughed in disbelief, we know about them. Abraham was accepted by God because of his faith in God, and God called him friend. Do you remember that time when God said, "I am not going to hide what I am planning from Abraham"? And he told him what he was planning with the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. God called him his friend. Do you want to have that close relationship with God? That's what's required. That is what's required. And God called him friend. Do you want that? This is the requirement. So God did provide the ram for the sacrifice. Can you imagine how heartbreaking it must have been going up that? And before they left, as they were going up, just before they left the two servants down below, and Abraham said, "Wait here until we return to you." We? How is it we? He knew that what God had said was going to kill his son, sacrifice him, burn him up. How is it going to be we? And as they were going up the mountain, he asked his father, "Father, where's the sacrifice? Where's the thing to be sacrificed? Everything is here. Everything's ready." How many times have they done this before? Probably several times a year, sacrificing in thanks to God. He had seen his father do this before. He knew what was required. And Abraham, his response was, God will provide the sacrifice. And God did provide. God did provide the sacrifice, just as he had said. And they did return to the servants. And they did return all the way home. to Isaac's mother, Sarah. God doesn't forget his promises. If you want that close relationship with God, if I want it, it requires one thing, not perfection, because none are perfect, believe me. None are perfect, very full of failures. Abraham himself was not perfect, but he did trust God. This trust, when we check it out, when we try it, we can try God and find that he is faithful. And through these times of testing, and all of us have times of testing, we will experience, like Abraham and Sarah did, that God is faithful and he will provide. And Isaac did grow up and he did have children, and through his children, more offspring, to the point that we see the nation of Israel today, a nation of millions. God did, and he always does, follow through on his promises. Test God and see that he is good and that he is faithful. And in that way, we will all gain that close relationship with him, being called his friends. And that's all for this evening. See you next time. Bye.